Hey folks, I'm recording this video from the ancestral in the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Not long ago, less than a week ago as of recording this video, a team discovered and identified a grave site in Kamloops, British Columbia at a former residential school of 215 children. Former students of that school. Now, we have begun to come to the understanding here in Canada that these schools were horrific, traumatic, dangerous, oppressive. That these schools forced children, Indigenous children, to speak our language, to dress like us, to cut their hair like us, to act like us, to live like us, to learn like us. That these schools in many ways created barriers between Indigenous children and the communities they were forced to leave, the communities they were dragged from, sometimes violently. Recently, it was reported in the Canadian media that after the Truth and Reconciliation report was made public, that report has 90 some odd tasks that we as a nation are supposed to undertake to help the survivors of residential schools heal. The survivor, not only the survivors of residential schools, but the communities, the Indigenous communities that have survived the residential school system to heal. Because we know that trauma never stays in the past or with one person. No, trauma loves to be shared today. And it loves to find its way into the future as a toxin. Trauma can not only destroy a life in the here and now, but also destroy the lives of others yet to come. But after the Truth and Reconciliation report came out, the Canadian government was asked to fund a project that would survey the sites of former residential schools, the last of which closed in 1997. A team wanted to survey these former residential schools to look for grave sites, to find the burial places of the children who died there. The project, it was reported, would have cost $1.5 million. The federal government said no. No, we're not going to do that. Now, in all fairness to the federal government, they have worked on a lot of different things. But the Truth and Reconciliation report, to me, is not a list of does not offer us a list of suggestions or nice-to-haves. These are things that the survivors of the residential school system have told us would help them heal, that would help their communities heal. These aren't optional. These are prescriptions. They're necessities. They're medicine. They're needed. I have heard it said that in Canada we do not have systemic racism, systemic injustice, systemic intolerance. We do not have systemic inequality. Canada is not like that. Canada is awesome, and Canada is awesome. I love my country. But we do have systemic issues. And those systemic issues have deep, deep roots. incredibly deep roots. And those deep roots have intertwined and wrapped themselves around many wonderful aspects of Canadian culture. When I hear that the Canadian government turned down a request for $1.5 million to begin the process of taking on one of those tasks mentioned in the Truth and Reconciliation report, I'm reminded that the same government was the one who put these residential schools into effect. I'm reminded that this is the same federal government that continues to fail to live up to the treaty obligations they agreed to. I'm reminded that this same federal government continues to break promises to our Indigenous peoples. How is this not an example of a systemic problem? Now, it's easy for us to say, well, this is a matter of politics, this is a matter of authority and power. But the truth is, it's our problem too. Because my government would not be acting this way. Our elected officials would not be acting this way if our elected officials thought that we cared. If they thought that the treatment of our Indigenous people was a priority for us, they would not act this way, because we would end up taking back that power. We would end up recalling them. We'd end up voting for someone who believes the treatment of our Indigenous peoples is a priority. It is important. This is what makes it systemic. Because it's throughout. These things happen. These things continue to happen because people like me are silent. Because people like me do not let our elected officials know that we do consider it a priority that we live up to our treaty obligations, that we live up to our promises. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you. May you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. And I pray that we would be courageous enough to see our place in these problems. And that we would lend our voice. We would lend our voice to correcting the problems. Amen.